Benjamin Impossible. Chapter 17. Triple Cross. Dr. Glockenspiel looked up from his meal and stared at Benjamin. What? Captain Lemontime turned toward the boy as well. What? Benjamin tapped his foot. That's not Charlie. My little brother had a lot more hair than that. Also, that kid has a mustache. Ah, Glockenspiel laughed. I got a little bored waiting for your airship to arrive, so decided to shave his hair off and draw on a mustache with a black marker. I think it gives him a certain flair, don't you think? Charlie, who had been looking around, started to yell and began banging on the walls of the jar. Despite the tantrum, Benjamin couldn't hear anything through the thick-walled vessel. Benjamin shook his head. I'm still not sure. How do I even know that's Charlie? For all I know, you lost him at sea, and this is some other strange kid whom you kidnapped. The haircut and mustache could just be a ruse to make him harder to identify. The Majordomo robot looked affronted. What do you mean a ruse? That's the little brat right there. He's sitting right before you. Go look at him. Benjamin shook his helmeted head. Look at him. I can't even hear him. This could be an animatronic robot you built to pass off as my brother. Glockenspiel snapped his fingers, and one of the waiter robots reached up and slid open a panel on the top of the jar. They could now hear Charlie yelling inside. Goo goo ga ga ga, Charlie yelled, banging his fists. Benjamin walked a little closer and bent forward. Goo la la goo ga ga la, he said, trying to calm the toddler. Charlie stopped yelling. Goo la la ga la la. The Majordomo frowned. As you can see, and hear, that is the real thing. Just stop talking in baby gibberish. I've heard enough of that nonsense with that toddler aboard my ship. Benjamin turned toward the Majordomo. This baby is terrified, and he doesn't recognize me in this spacesuit. I'm just trying to reassure him. Benjamin turned back to the jar and waved his hands. Goo goo la la mumuga. Reassure him? Glockenspiel said with contempt. He's a babbling idiot. The rumors of that baby's intelligence have been vastly exaggerated. All it's done is cry and poop since it came on board. Benjamin shrugged. I've always been the smart one in the family. At this, the toddler yelled with anger and banged little balled fists against the side of the jar. Gaga! La la! Googa la! At Glockenspiel's command, the waiter robot closed the access panel and the baby's babbling cut off. Glockenspiel sat back in his chair and smiled. Now you have seen the child. If you want him back, you will give me that recipe. Let's see it, boy. No funny business. Very well, Benjamin said, walking over to the stroller. He reached down inside and lifted the hyperhelium generator out. Carrying it back to the table, he placed it before the Majordomo robot. What is this? Glockenspiel asked. I asked for a formula. This looks like a toaster. Benjamin shrugged. That's it, I'm afraid. There is no formula. What do you mean? Glockenspiel yelled. There has to be a formula. How does Professor Impossible make hyperhelium without a formula? Benjamin held up his hands. Chill out, dude. This is better than a formula. This is the actual device Dad built to generate the hyperhelium. I don't know exactly how it works, but you pour water into this hole and hyperhelium comes out at this end. It takes energy, of course, so here are the contacts for attaching an external power source. That's it? Glockenspiel asked. Water plus electricity equals hyperhelium? Yep, Benjamin agreed. But, how does it work? How would I know? Benjamin asked. I'm a mechanical engineer, not a theoretical physicist. I'm afraid to open it up and find out. That gadget cost Dad close to $1 billion to build. If I tinkered with it and it broke, I'd be grounded for weeks. The Majordomo stared at Benjamin suspiciously. You expect me to believe that this gadget is the secret hyperhelium formula and you don't even know how it works? Benjamin shrugged. I don't know how a microwave works, and I still manage to make popcorn. This device is a combination of science and dumb luck. It took a lot of work and trial and error to make it functional, and it's the only one in the world. Glockenspiel looked down at the hyperhelium generator, cursing in disbelief. The robot suddenly leaned forward and grinned. Show me. Say again, Benjamin asked. Show me that this device produces hyperhelium and that this isn't some trick. The Majordomo robot's eyes narrowed. Prove that this machine is real or the child gets lasered. Benjamin held up his hands. Fine. If you don't believe me, I'll show you. We'll need some equipment, of course. Do you have an industrial C-class battery, 12-gauge wire, and 2 alligator clips? I'm afraid I didn't bring any. Glockenspiel, looking annoyed, muttered to himself, "Don't go anywhere, I'll be right back." The Majordomo robot sat back and froze. It appeared to be staring into space. "What happened to him?" Captain Lementheim whispered. "It's like he turned off." "I believe that Glockenspiel cut the remote connection to this robot. He's probably controlling another robot on his ship, looking for the necessary supplies. It will take him a few minutes to find them and get them here." "Did you know he would try to use the device?" Lementheim asked. Benjamin shrugged. "I assumed he would. That's why I didn't bring any of those supplies myself. We are stalling for time, Captain." "Oh, why?" the captain asked. "I'd rather not say yet, in case Dr. Glockenspiel is listening to our conversation somehow." "Oh." After a few minutes, they turned to see a figure running toward them from the main gate of the fort. It was a robot dressed in a sailor uniform, its hands full of items. The robot ran up to the table and deposited the equipment on the tablecloth, then stepped back and froze. The Majordomo robot reanimated and looked down at the supplies. "Here we are. Now what?" Benjamin pointed to the supplies. "Now you hook up that battery to the input terminals on the hyperhelium generator. Even a robotic scientist like you ought to figure that one out. Connect the positive lead to the red wire." Glockenspiel followed the instructions and connected the battery. "It's not doing anything," he said with menace. Benjamin shook his head sadly. "You've only completed part of the formula. You still need to add water. Do you have any water?" They all looked around. Despite the plethora of glasses around them, they were all empty. The robotic army was eating invisible food just like the Majordomo. "I have water on my ship. I could have gotten some on my last trip there," the Majordomo complained. "Why didn't you mention that when I left the last time?" "Sorry, dude. I thought it was pretty obvious that you needed water." The Majordomo growled, then his body froze once again. Several minutes later, another robotic sailor ran from the gate carrying a plastic bottle of water. The Majordomo robot unfroze, grabbed the bottle and poured the contents into the hyperhelium generator. "Now what? Nothing is happening." Benjamin pointed at the exit nozzle. "Hyperhelium is coming out the other end. You just can't see it because the gas is invisible. Do you have a balloon to place over that nozzle?" "Yes," the Majordomo growled. "I have tons of balloons back on my ship." "Well, maybe you should go get one," Benjamin said with a smile. The Majordomo grabbed the empty water bottle instead and held it upside down over the gas nozzle. The bottle wobbled as hyperhelium filled the interior. Glockenspiel put the bottle cap back on and let go. The bottle shot up into the air, lost in the clouds above. "It works!" Glockenspiel cried out. "The device works!" "Yes," Benjamin said patiently. "It's the real deal and one of a kind. Now it's time to hand over Charlie. That was the plan." The Majordomo looked over at Benjamin slyly. "Hand him over? What makes you think I was going to give him back? Now that I have the world's only hyperhelium generator, I want to keep it that way. Baby Impossible here makes a good hostage and an excellent reminder to his father never to build another one of these machines again." "Ah," said Benjamin angrily, "I thought you might try pulling something like this. You are truly despicable." The boy held up a finger. "Fortunately, I am rather diabolical myself. That is why I superglued a time bomb to the bottom of the hyperhelium machine." "What?" Glockenspiel and Captain Lementheim cried out in unison. Benjamin pointed at the device. "Go ahead, turn it over. You'll see the bomb right there. I mixed up several pounds of explosive candy and combined it with my own special recipe of cordite and magnesium powder. That firecracker should make quite a bang and destroy the hyperhelium generator when it blows." The Majordomo flipped the device over to reveal the time bomb. It was flat, metal, and the size of a paperback book. A number pad was inset on the surface along with a countdown timer. There were still several hours on the clock, but the timer was counting down second by second. Glockenspiel tried to pry the explosive off with his robotic fingers, but it would not budge. "Don't even try to take the bomb off," Benjamin warned. "It's glued on very tightly. Any tampering will set it off and destroy the generator in the process." "You sneaky little kid," the Majordomo hissed. "What do you think you are trying to pull here?" Benjamin shrugged. "You're the sneaky one, Heinrich von Baby Snatcher. You just tried to pull a double cross on me. You can't be angry if I do the same thing." Disable this explosive, the robot screamed, striking the table with its metal fist. Turn this thing off, or you and your brother will be destroyed. The boy shrugged again. I can't turn it off, Glockenstupid. Only Charlie can do that. He's the one with the disarm code. The majordomo stood up and walked around the table to stand before Benjamin. He looked down at the boy and pointed at him. How can a baby know the disarm code? He is just a dumb baby. Oh, Charlie is smarter than he lets on. He's been transmitting information about your operation this whole time. We know all about your salvaged submarine and your ultimate goal for world domination. Impossible, the robot exclaimed in surprise. You are just guessing those things. Benjamin crossed his arms and shook his head sadly. If I am just guessing, how do you explain these little bits of trivia? You like to karaoke to Elvis songs every evening in your submarine. You've also programmed your robots to dance to the song Thriller by Michael Jackson. The majordomo's mouth dropped. How do you know this? The baby told you? The robot grabbed the hyperhelium device and ran over to Charlie's jar. He banged on the wall with a metal fist and yelled at the toddler. How can a baby transmit information from a submarine while trapped inside an unbreakable jar? How did you do it, you little stinker? He can't hear you, dork, Benjamin commented. That jar seems to be soundproof. Glockenspiel hit a button, and the access panel opened on top of Charlie's jar. You will disable this bomb, you evil little baby! Glockenspiel yelled as he dropped the device through the hatch to land next to the child. Otherwise, you will explode as well! Goo-ga-goo-gee-gee! Charlie yelled out in anger. Oh, shut up! Glockenspiel yelled back as he shut the hatch again, cutting off the baby's babbling. Benjamin walked over to the table and leaned against it. Gee whiz, Dr. Glockenspiel. You shouldn't talk to a baby like that. They are very impressionable. The robot turned to Benjamin, pointing back at the jar. That's not a baby. That's some kind of evil spy baby. How did that child spy on my ship and transmit a message? My security is perfect. Benjamin shrugged. He didn't actually transmit a message, Glockendupe. I just made that part up. The majordomo robot walked forward and shook a fist in front of Benjamin's face. Made it up? Then how do you know about Elvis? How do you know about my submarine? He must have sent you a message somehow. Benjamin raised his hands. Oh, Charlie told me about the Elvis thing a few minutes ago. He's been banging out Morse code messages this entire time with his fists. Also, that baby babble is a language that we invented called Kid Latin. Charlie and I are the only people in the world who can speak Kid Latin. Kid Latin? The robot said, sounding confused. Yeah, dork. You don't have much experience with children, do you? Of course not. I am a brilliant scientist. Well, kids make up secret languages all the time so they can talk without their parents knowing. You've got to pay attention. Kids can be very sneaky. Benjamin pointed toward Charlie's prison. In fact, it looks like that baby is doing something sneaky right now. Charlie was now standing inside the jar with his diaper around his ankles. What is that naughty child doing now? The majordomo cried out. Benjamin grinned. Maybe he's disarming that explosive. Charlie ignored them and began to pee. He aimed his stream into the input port on the hyperhelium generator. The machine, still connected to the battery, converted water from his urine into hyperhelium. The jar wobbled as it filled with levitating gas, then slowly floated upward. The baby smiled and waved down at Dr. Glockenspiel as his jar floated up into the air. That little devil baby turned his pee-pee into hyperhelium, Glockenspiel yelled in surprise. And now he is escaping with my device. The majordomo robot ran forward and jumped, trying to pull the baby's jar back to the ground before it floated out of reach. Benjamin dove forward and tackled the majordomo robot's legs, and they both tumbled to the ground, digging a trench in the grassy earth with the robot's painted face. Captain Lemontime stared up in wonder at the hovering child. Captain, Benjamin said, stop gawking at that flying baby. It's time to fight. You've reached the end of Chapter 17. If you are enjoying Benjamin's adventures, please leave a like below. Then continue to Chapter 18, The Battle of Fort Jefferson.